Our next speaker is Kehinde Sowunmi. She is presenting her talk entitled, please work with me, this is in German, okay? Dürfen, Schwarze, Blumen, Malen. Yeah. Y'all sound American, so y'all would agree with the way I spoke that. I'm gonna double check with her. Kehinde is a Ph.D. student in Germanic languages and literatures from Lagos, Nigeria. An interesting fact about her is she's a twin, and her full name is Amoke Inde Bebon. Please join me in welcoming Kehinde.
Picture this, Berlin, 1986, in a dimly lit cafe. About 8 Black women sit together, head bows over papers, coffee cup in hands, exchanging stories, ideas, experiences, and laughter. Now you see, these women aren't just friends hanging out. They are quotidian intellectuals, scholars, and writers attempting to carve a space for themselves in a country that is yet to acknowledge them. They are the face of the newly formed Ade Frau, Afro-German Frauen, a new word for an old presence. And yes to that question you have in your mind. They are German. Now, I know many of you did not expect to find Black women in the story of German cultural life, but they exist. And they are not mere footnotes of German history. They are the visible presence of Germany's unacknowledged historical past. And these women used writing and storytelling to make visible the hidden realities of the Afro-German experience. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever said where you're from and have someone look at you like that answer didn't quite make sense? Maybe your name, your accent, your face, or your skin didn't quite fit the picture they had in their head. Well, this was and still is the lived experience of the Afro-Germans. And this very mindset, this monolithic mindset, is the one those women in that cafe and others after them sought to dismantle. The mindset about who is or should be German. Now, one of those women in that cafe was May Ayim. May Ayim was a scholar, activist, and poet who used poetry to critique the linguistic and cultural borders of German belonging. In one of her poems, Aus dem Rahmen, she writes, Ich male dir ein dunkles Gedicht vor dein weißes Gesicht. I paint you a dark poem for your white face. Now you say, Ayim uses ich in this poem as a confrontation and declaration of presence. She says, Ich bin's. It is I. I am here, and I belong. Now, this I is not ascribed to one individual. It is collective. It includes everyone who has ever had their Germanness questioned. She uses another word, first. Now, this word she used as a representation of a new ground where the Afro-German and Black German identity is not an anomaly, but a foundation. German is a language where the word Schwarze is linked to many forms of illegalities. Okay. Schwarzarbeit, Schwarzmarkt, Schwarzfahren. Ayim, however, reclaims this word as power, presence, and pride. For those of you who are unfamiliar with German language, one of the biggest linguistic mistakes you can make is not capitalizing your nouns. And trust me, the students in my class, in my language class, can attest to this. Ayim, however, does the most radical thing with this word. She writes Schwarze in all caps. Now, this is not a typo. It is intentional. It is a proclamation and a refusal to let the normative system define the grammatic, aesthetic, and cultural borders that she has been given and handed. Ayim Schwarze steps out of the frame to be acknowledged and invites us all to do the same. But once we've stepped out of this frame, what comes next? Well, that is the very question Sharon Dodua Otoo poses in her essay, Dürfen, Schwarze, Blumen, Malen. Are Black people allowed to paint flowers? Now, this question appears as a simple rhetorical question. It is, however, a deeply political one. Otoo asks, must Black artists always create through pain? Why is Black creativity only validated when it centers, educates, or explains trauma? Why are we expected to diversify the canon and never for once define it? Like Ayim, she begins with grammar. She insists on capitalizing the word Schwarze as a form of solidarity. Because as we have come to understand, language or form is never neutral. Otoo, however, offers a solution, a purpose scribing, a form of writing that comes from joy, from contradiction, a writing that doesn't justify itself. Because you see, for Otoo, painting flowers is not a retreat from protest. It is epistemology. It is the refusal to let the normative system define the scope of our imagination. And these flowers are not ornamental. They are Afro-futurists, tools for dreaming, for imagination, for resisting, and endless imagination and possibilities. As a Nigerian and African scholar in German studies, a field largely and mostly shaped by Eurocentric traditions, I often carry the weight of conditional belonging, the pressure to prove that my work is valid, my work is serious, that I belong here. But like Otoo, here is how I've chosen to paint my flowers. In one of my classes last semester, I wrote a surprising paper on a German kids TV show called Bent as Broads. Funny character, I know. Thanks again, Andreas. You see, this character is the US Sesame Street in Germany. And I wrote on how the likability of this character is a mirror of the mad modern subject. But I was able to write this paper not just because it was fun, which it was, or because I wanted to and I did, but because I could. Because I have come to understand that joy and absurdity are also valid sides of knowledge. And the freedom to choose creativity over certain expectation is one of my flowers. But I know this freedom isn't available to everyone. But the path that I walk in this field was forged by Afro-German women like May Ayim, Sharon Dodua Otoo, and here in the US, Martin Luther King Jr., and their refusal to be erased. In this refusal, their words made room for mine. So I reject the idea that I'm here just to diversify the field. No, I'm here to define it too. Like Ayim, I've come to understand that breaking form is a method. And like Otoo, I have learned that creative freedom is a grammar of survival. So, you see, my flowers do not bloom in opposition to protest. No. It blooms alongside it. In my choice to center Black interiority, to write from a place of rest and not just reaction, to treat softness not as silence, but as a strategy. So I leave you with this. What forms of thoughts have you inherited? And what might it mean for you to step outside of it? And most importantly, what is your flower? And what flowers would you paint or might you paint if no one is watching? Because maybe now is the time to pick up your brush like I did and paint. Thank you.